You don't need to feel what they feel. You don't need to comfort them. You don't need to save them. You just need to understand precisely, quietly, without attachment. Because empathy, when it's cold, becomes a weapon, a scanner, a map of someone's mind laid out for you to navigate without ever stepping into their chaos. Most people confuse empathy with softness. They believe feeling everything makes them kind. But the truth is, feeling everything makes you vulnerable, easily manipulated, easily overwhelmed, easily broken. In this video, you'll learn how to read people with surgical precision, without absorbing their pain, without taking on their emotions, without losing your edge. This is cold empathy, and it's how you gain control without saying a word. 1. Why empathy becomes a weapon when it's cold. We've been taught that empathy is softness, that to be a good person, you must feel what others feel, absorb their sadness, carry their pain. But that kind of empathy, the emotional kind, makes you vulnerable. It opens the door for guilt, manipulation, and exhaustion. Because when you start feeling for everyone, you lose track of yourself. And worse, you lose control of the interaction. But there's another form of empathy, a colder version, sharper, cleaner, and far more powerful. Cold empathy. It's the ability to observe emotions without absorbing them, to understand someone's state of mind, what they feel, why they feel it, what they're hiding beneath it. Without reacting emotionally. It's not about sympathy. It's not about connection. It's about calibration. When used right, cold empathy turns you into a scanner. You read people like code. You spot patterns, weaknesses, blind spots. Not to comfort them, but to position yourself. You start seeing exactly what makes people tick, where they're fragile, where they can be pushed, where they don't even see themselves clearly. And when you can see someone that clearly, you hold all the leverage. Most manipulators use hot empathy. They feel your emotions, mirror them, then weaponize them against you. But the cold empath, they flip the script. They don't feel your pain. They see it, they track it, and they stay grounded enough to decide what to do with it. That's the key. Understanding without attachment, reading without reacting, feeling absolutely nothing except control. 2. Emotional vs. cognitive empathy. Not all empathy is the same. One makes you weaker, the other makes you untouchable. Most people live in the first kind, emotional empathy. You feel what others feel. When they cry, your heart breaks. When they rage, you tense up. When they suffer, you carry it. Sounds noble, sounds human, but in high-stakes situations, it's a liability. Because the moment you feel their emotion, you start losing your frame. You overthink, you hesitate, you get pulled into their chaos. And now, instead of seeing clearly, you're reacting emotionally. Now compare that to cognitive empathy. You don't absorb their feelings. You analyze them. You don't say, I feel your pain. You say, I understand what triggered this pain, why you're expressing it this way, and where it's going. You read their emotional state, like a map, without stepping into the terrain. It's surgical, precise, detached. You see the sadness, but you don't sink into it. You sense the anger, but you don't flinch. You detect the fear, but you don't try to fix it. You track it. That's it. This is where power lives, in the ability to read someone without being absorbed by them. Emotional empathy creates fusion. You lose your edge. Cognitive empathy creates insight. You gain an advantage. Let's be clear. Cognitive empathy isn't cold because it's cruel. It's cold because it's controlled. You're not detaching because you don't care. You're detaching so you can see clearly, so you can make decisions based on truth, not emotional noise. And when you can do that, you move through people like a strategist, not a rescuer. This is how you protect your boundaries without becoming numb, how you stay aware of others without being entangled, how you stay in power, even while understanding someone else's pain. The world doesn't need more emotional sponges. It needs precise observers, people who can walk into a room, scan every face, read every signal dash, and remain completely calm. That's not empathy from the heart. That's empathy from the mind. That's cold. And that's power. 3. The Cold Empath's Toolkit. Reading people without reacting isn't a gift. It's a skill, one that can be trained, refined, weaponized. A cold empath isn't just good with people. They're a silent analyst, a psychological scanner. Here's the toolkit they use to break anyone down without saying a word. First, micro-reaction reading. Track the invisible. Most people lie with their words, but their body always leaks the truth. A flicker in the eye, a half-second smirk, a twitch in the jaw, a subtle shift in breathing. Cold empaths don't just look, they observe. They know the microsecond before someone says, "I'm fine," is where the real answer lives. Why it works? Because micro-reactions are involuntary. They betray the true emotional state before the mask gets adjusted, and when you catch that moment, you own the truth beneath the surface. 2. Emotional pattern mapping. Spot the loops. Everyone has an emotional fingerprint. They react to the same triggers, repeat the same defenses, hide behind the same masks. Cold empaths map it. They watch how someone reacts under pressure, in silence, in confrontation, in disappointment. They trace patterns, defensiveness, avoidance, overcompensation, and once you see the loop, you can predict behavior before it happens. 3. Trigger point analysis. Find the hidden wounds. Every person has emotional weak spots, certain words, tones, topics. Cold empaths don't avoid them, they identify them. By watching flinches, overreactions, sudden shutdowns, then they store that data, not to harm, but to know exactly where the power lines run. Because when you know what breaks someone, you also know how to hold them together or pull them apart. 4. Language calibration. Decode how they think. How people speak reveals how they process the world. Do they talk in absolutes? Victim language? Hyper-control phrasing? Cold empaths don't just hear the story, they decode the operating system. She always does this. R's pattern of helplessness. I just want to fix it. Control impulse. I guess I'm just broken. Identity level shame. The words aren't just language, they're blueprints. 5. Disassociation control. Stay unmoved. None of this matters if you get pulled into their energy. Cold empaths master the art of internal distance. They can sit across from pain, rage, manipulation, and feel nothing. Not numbness, neutrality. They breathe slower. Anchor their posture. Watch their thoughts. They let emotion pass through the room, but not through their body. This is what makes the cold empath different. They see more than most, but carry less. This toolkit doesn't make you robotic. It makes you dangerously aware. You don't need to fix people. You don't need to feel for them. You just need to know exactly who they are, beneath their stories, beyond their performance, behind their eyes. Because when you can read them like that, you don't chase power, you become it. 4. How to use cold empathy in real life. Cold empathy isn't for show. It's not about appearing smart, it's about strategic advantage in every human interaction. Here's how it plays out in real life. 1. In negotiation, target the motive, not the words. While others get lost in details, you look for leverage. You watch how they respond to delays, silence, and uncertainty. You track what makes them rush, what makes them backpedal, what makes their voice shift. You identify their true motive: status, security, validation. And aim your offer straight at it. They think it's a fair deal. You know it's surgical influence. 2. In conflict, stay emotionally still. When someone attacks, don't counter, don't flinch, just observe. You watch their energy, their patterns, their rhythm. They want escalation. You give them stillness. That stillness makes them spiral. They expose more. You reveal nothing. That's control, not through dominance, but through absence. 3. In relationships, control the frame without manipulation. You see their wounds. You hear their narratives. You don't judge, but you also don't rescue. When they try to guilt you, you see the tactic. When they play the victim, you don't react. You recognize. You hold space, but not responsibility. You stay calm, but not entangled. And that's what keeps you in power, even in intimacy. 4. In leadership, influence without pressure. People follow calm. They trust presence. They reveal more to the person, who listens deeply, but doesn't try to fix them. You use cold empathy to read the emotional temperature of the room, then shift the mood without saying much. You don't motivate with hype. You calibrate with precision. And because your guidance feels aligned, people move not because they have to, but because they believe they chose it. 5. In manipulation defense, see it coming, step aside. Cold empathy lets you detect manipulation. Before it hooks in, you feel the shift in tone, the sudden guilt, the indirect threat. But instead of engaging, you create space. Emotionally detach. Let them collapse into their own tactics, without your energy feeding it. You don't block the punch. You step out of range, and they hit air. This is the real use of cold empathy, not to feel more, but to see clearer, to stay above the current, while reading every ripple beneath it. No entanglement, no reaction, just full spectrum awareness, executed in silence. 5. The dangers of emotional entanglement. The more you understand people, the more dangerous the game becomes. Because once you start reading pain, you'll feel tempted to fix it. Once you see their wounds, you'll feel pulled to protect them. Once you see through them, you'll want to save them. That's the trap. The moment you emotionally attach, you lose your edge. Emotional entanglement doesn't happen all at once. It begins in subtle ways. You start overthinking their silence. You justify toxic behavior because they've been through a lot. You break your own boundaries because you understand why they act that way. That's not empathy. That's self-abandonment in disguise. And it happens when empathy becomes emotional instead of strategic. A cold empath knows this. The deeper you see into people, the more you must discipline your heart, not harden it. Discipline it. You can see their trauma without carrying it. You can witness their manipulation without reacting to it. You can hold space without being pulled into it. Because here's the truth. The moment you feel too much, you start acting for them, not for yourself. You overextend. You over-explain. You lose neutrality. And neutrality is the source of all power in cold empathy. Without it, you're not a strategist. You're just another emotionally entangled observer who used to have clarity. So stay sharp, stay calm, stay separate. Don't let your vision become your prison. Don't let understanding become obligation. Read them. Feel nothing. Move accordingly. That's what keeps you untouchable. 6. Final CTA. You don't need to feel their emotions to understand them. You don't need to relate to see clearly. You don't need to react to control the room. You just need to observe. Quietly, calmly, completely detached. Cold empathy isn't about becoming a machine. It's about becoming a mirror with precision. You see their wounds, but you don't pick them up. You hear their stories, but you don't lose yourself inside them. You read their emotional code, but never hand over your frame. That's how you stay untouchable, because the person who feels everything gets pulled into every storm, but the one who observes it all, without flinching, controls the weather. So here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, don't react emotionally. Just observe. In silence, in presence, in power. Watch how people shift. Watch how much they reveal. When you reveal nothing, that's cold empathy in action. And once you master that, there's one more move left. Psychological resistance. The skill that makes you impossible to manipulate. Because knowing others means power, but protecting yourself means sovereignty. That's next. In the next video, you'll learn how to harden your mind, shield your emotions, and become a wall no one can penetrate.